All right, we are going to be looking at graphing linear equations. So today we're going to look at going from an equation to a table, and then we'll graph that. So the steps to go from an equation to a table, first you want to make sure that if your equation is not already solved for y, so y equals something, that you need to solve for y. That means isolate y on the one side and everything else is on the other side of the equal sign. Once you do that, you're going to create your table. One way you can do that is you can fill in on your table -1, 0, and 1 for your x values. If there's a fraction though, you're going to use 0, the reciprocal of the fraction, and the negative reciprocal of the fraction for your x values. And I've got some examples here. So on this one here, my fraction was 2/3. So the reciprocal, that just means flip it. So I took my 2/3 and my new x value became 3/2. We just flipped it. Once I do that, it allows 2/3 times 3/2 is equal to 1. So that's how we're using our reciprocal for those. And then 1 minus 1 is 0. Then the other one's supposed to be the negative reciprocal. So that is your fraction flipped, and then you make it negative. So 2/3 times -3/2, that's -1. And you can work those out. A positive times a negative is going to be a negative. And then 2 times 3 is 2, and 2 times 3 is 6. 3 times 2 is 6. 6 divided by 6 is my -1 there. That's how you get that. So then I would have had -1 minus 1, which is -2. So the reason we're using our reciprocal is to give us nice graphable numbers here. So once I have created my table, plug x into the equation, substitute. So this is the example. So far we would have had the table and then our x values. Plug into the equation or substitute those x values into the equation and solve for y to complete the table. Next step, you plot your ordered pairs or your points, and it's x and then y. And then you draw a line through the points to create your graph. And then here, remember, a linear equation is an equation whose graph is a straight line. So if when you're plotting your points, you don't end up with a straight line, you've probably made an error. You need to go back and check that. The points on the line are the solutions of the equation. But remember, so on my example here that I've already worked out, these points are not the only solutions. Every point on this line, it's infinite number of solutions. Every single point, as small as you can get, those are all solutions to that equation. So here are the example. It was y equals x plus 2. So using my steps, it says solve for y. Well, I already have solved for y. That's here isolated up by itself. Then it said to create a table. So I created this table, and I used -1, 0, and 1, just like the step said. And then I just substituted my x values. So -1 for x, so y equals -1 plus 2, which is 1. Then I did 0, y equals 0 plus 2, well 0 plus 2 is 2. And then I did 1, y equals 1 plus 2, which is 3. So I've completed my table, and then I plotted my points. So -1, we start at the origin, and we go -1 on the x. Up 1 for my y value of 1. Plot your point. You're not touching the paper until you plot your point. So starting at the origin, I'm at 0, stay at 0, and then the y value is up 2. Plot your point. The next one is from the origin, we're going to go over 1, and then it says to go up 3 for my y value. 1, 2, 3. Plot your point. I used a ruler to make sure I had a nice straight line. You may need to do that. And then I put arrows on both ends because my line goes forever and ever. My next example says graph y equals 1/4 x minus 1. So this is where we had the fraction rule that we need to remember. So it said we're going to use 0 was the 1, so that goes in the middle. That's my middle x value. And then it said to take my fraction and use the reciprocal. So the reciprocal of 1/4 is 4 over 1, which is the same as 4. And then the negative reciprocal is -4 over 1, or -4. So I used the simplified versions. I did not put 4 over 1 and -4 over 1 in my table. There's no sense in doing that. They have the same value. We're just going to use our integers. So once I have my x values, I'm going to substitute those into my equation. And so let's do this one first. It's a nice, easy one. 1/4 times my x value of 0. So anything times 0 is 0. And then I have my minus 1. So 0, take away 1, that's -1. As you can see here, I've got 0, -1. Next, I have -4 for my x value. So 1/4 times -4, that's going to be -1. So bring that down. -1 minus 1 is -2. So I have -4 and then my -2 for my y value. Then I substituted my 4. 1/4 times 4 is 1. Brought that down. Minus 1. 1 minus 1 is 0. So when x is 4, y is 0. X is 4, y is 0. Then I went over to my graph and I plotted my points. So start here. -4 for our x value. Start at the origin. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then -2 down to 1, 2. Plot the point. 0, we stay there for our x, but we go down 1 for our y. Plot the point. And then at the origin again, we go to the right 4, our +4 for our x value, and then we don't go up or down, the y value is 0, so plot your point. Use the ruler, drew my line, arrows at both ends because my line goes on infinitely in both directions. Next, I have y equals 2. So to graph y equals 2, I use the same x values that it said in my steps there, -1, 0, 1. And no matter what, y is always 2. So I just filled in that 2 for all my y's. And then I plotted from my origin, -1 up 2, 0 up 2, from my origin over 1 up 2. Connected my points, have my line there. And I'm going to ask you this question here later. I want you to think about, what do you notice about your y equals some number equations? So remember, this was y equals 2, and notice my y-axis here, and that's up 2 from the origin. Next graph I have, x equals -3. And so I filled in x equals -3 because it tells me all the x values are going to be -3. So then I just randomly picked numbers, and I just used the same numbers I was using for my x value. And then I plotted my points. -3, -1, down 1. Then back to the origin, -3, 0, plot. Back to the origin, -3, up 1. And I drew my line here to connect my points. All right. So now I want you to tell me, what do you notice about your x equals some number equations? So there's my x-axis right here. The equation is x equals -3. All right, so I'm hoping what you noticed is that our y equations, they run horizontally, and they're going to intersect our y-axis at whatever that number is too. So it's all those y equals 2 numbers. And then let's look at our x equals. So x equals -3. We have a vertical line here, and it intersects at where x equals -3, and it's all of our -3 values for x. Again, come to my meeting if you have any questions, and you can also send me an email, and I hope you have a great day.